Welcome to the All In, All Out podcast. My name is Shannon Ross, founder and executive director of The Community. This podcast is focused on the goal of creating a justice system more worthy of that name, and why you, no matter who you are, should care. The name of the podcast refers to the fact that we must be all in and go all out to truly address the way justice is viewed and applied in America. Furthermore, the sense of separation the system imposes is an illusion. What happens to individuals on both sides of the fence is connected and tied to the same fate. How we treat incarcerated people reflects the state and direction of society. Those inside are all out, and those of us outside are all in. As for me, I am no more than a dreamer who knows there is a better way and is devoted to reaching out and holding on, even when it is uncomfortable, because connections and empathy are the foundation of the types of strong, healthy communities that we all want. I spent 17 years in the Wisconsin prison system, where I obtained my bachelor's degree in business administration, had several articles published locally and nationally, co-created a mental health program that now exists in several facilities throughout the state, and founded The Community. Upon release at the end of 2020, I obtained my master's degree in sustainable peace building at the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee, co-founded a successful multi-dimensional justice solutions firm called Paradigm Shift, became a first-time father, and I'm currently a consultant at Marquette University's higher education and prison program. But these achievements have occurred alongside numerous and constant failures. Therefore, I, and however, remain all in and all out. Today's conversation is around the dynamic between formerly incarcerated people getting an apartment versus a house and starting their own business versus getting a job. Also, today's episode is not brought to you, but maybe in the future, by Collectivo. So for today's conversation, we have Ruben Gaona, the co-founder of The Way Out and executive director of My Way Out. Do you want to talk a bit about how you got into this work and what the My Way Out is doing and is hoping to do?
Yeah, most definitely. I'll talk. Well, first I started as a for-profit. I co-founded The Way Out, where we're finding employment. Providing second chance opportunities for justice impacted people, leveraging technology. Eventually, the pandemic happened. When the pandemic happened, we started seeing that a lot of more people were coming out. And when Governor Evers mandated the shutdown, a lot of people had no place to go to find support services. And the nonprofit organizations also didn't have the technology to onboard someone via technology because it was all paper applications. So we started providing that support and how we could use our platform to help them out. Then we found ourselves providing the support services directly, and we're like, okay, now what are we doing? What do we do here? So in order to help, we created our own nonprofit as well, So in the fall of 2021, we started our nonprofit called My Way Out, which is empowering the lives of justice impacted people and their families. And basically, it's what the name says for itself. We ask people, what is your way out? Where do we meet you when you're coming out? What do you need assistance with? And our job, I believe, is our job as a nonprofit organization is to provide those support services for the individuals. And if we can't provide them directly, who do we look out? Who do we reach out for other organizations that could do the same thing or provide those opportunities?
I know when you all first started, there was definitely this confusion amongst a lot of us, like what is the difference? Are they the same thing? So now it's become very clear, but I think at the beginning, I'm sure you answered that question a variety of times.
Yes, it definitely became, and the for-profit, it became a real, okay, are you guys a nonprofit? Are you guys a for-profit? And intentionally, I tell everybody, our intention was never to become, create a nonprofit, but we saw the needs, so we're like, okay, how do we step up that need? And then during that need, we also found out our little niche that people needed assistance in technology, that basic introduction to technology. So we're like, okay, how do we scale this up? How do we offer those basic introductions to technology and partnering with organizations that are out there that are doing amazing work, We reached out with Nadia Johnson from Go Tech Hub, and she was like, how can I help? I'm more than happy to help you guys. And we're asking, well, we need a facilitator, because I'm not an expert in technology, but you are. Can you facilitate this introduction to individuals that have been incarcerated for 5 to 15 to 20 years on how to show them how to use the laptop, the cell phone, and how to navigate different systems so they don't get scammed, because a lot of people get scammed. I know I got scammed when I first came out. And till this day, my account just got hacked. My bank account got hacked not even a couple months ago. So
Yeah, with the digital literacy packet that we've made and we're going to be sending in sometime soon, one of my biggest things, I think it became like a joke amongst the team, is I kept saying like, but we got to put everything about scams in there. Like people come out, and I'm lucky I didn't. I clicked a number of things when I first got out that could have been, and so yeah, that's a significant issue that people have coming out. You get one time to resend a friend request to me on Facebook, and then I'm not.
yeah. It's funny.
One mulligan.
I didn't get into social media until I started. Like I came out in March 1st of 2017, and I didn't get into Facebook and Instagram and all that until I became a co-founder, which was like in 2019. And I tell you what, I'm like, now I see why I stayed away.
How many classes have you had of that? What's the name of it?
So we started in 2022, we did Bridging the Tech Gap for returning citizens. We did 4 cohorts. And then in 2023, we started going inside of Milwaukee with the CRC, Milwaukee County Community Reintegration Center.
Yeah.
Such a long word, but formerly north of the House of Correction. We just completed our second cohort. One was a male, the first one. We completed our second cohort, which was a female who graduated last month.
Oh, they're not together? They're like...
Yeah, it's 3 weeks apart. So we finished one. No, it's not co-ed. So we finished one cohort, and then we started the females, 6 week. We completed that, and then next week we actually start a third cohort.
Cool. Okay. I also didn't know the name. I wanted to like cleverly have a way for you to say it for the people.
No, well, the one inside the prison, we changed the name because out here was just basically a Bridging the Tech Gap for returning citizens.
Didn't know that.
So then, as we started getting feedback for the other cohorts, they started saying, you know what? I was like, it would be nice if you included some kind of financial literacy because nowadays, your bank app and bank information sends your cell phone. So how do you teach them how to download that app so you could track your money and be able to know what you're spending and all that? So inside, we're like, okay, so how do we scale this up? So we called it now Building a Path to Success, where it's not only the technology aspect, it's also rent smart, financial literacy, resume writing, and interviewing skills that's included. So instead of 4 weeks, it goes to 6 weeks. And now, right now, we're in the process of finalizing a contract so we could scale that into a 10-week program where we're going to offer virtual reality training for certifications and all that.
Okay. Who does the financial literacy part of that?
We partner with UW-Madison Extension.
Okay, gotcha.
Yeah, I mean, you connected us.
Well, yeah.
I got a text message on a Sunday morning. Ruben, you need to connect with Johnny from UW Extension. I was like, okay, Shannon. So I had to call her.
She was aggressively trying to reach you, and she said, I can't catch him. I was like, well, I'll find a way to connect you. So transitioning into question about the topic of discussion. Yeah. You've had experience with applying for jobs, having jobs, and then creating now 2 entities that are doing well. Yes. What has been for you the dynamic, the difference between those two that stands out in terms of someone who has a record?
Okay. Applying for employment coming out, mind you, I had an outstanding resume, I would say, coming out of prison. I was a supervisor for the Department of Defense for auto processing for the Navy prior to getting incarcerated. So I did that for 3 years. And then prior to that, I was in the Navy for 6.5 years, honorably discharged, where I was also a supervisor in the Navy. So I joined the Navy when I was 19. So from 19 to 28, had a stunning employment history. Great jobs, skill love, ranked #1. So coming out, I came out, I think, with a mentality of saying, I want to help people. What's the best way of me helping people? Well, let me become a case manager because sadly but true, my case manager didn't do nothing for me when I was incarcerated. So I was like, let's show people there's a different side to that world. So I came out with that mentality, I just want to be a case manager. I want to help people. I had that HR background. I had that experience. And then reality hit. I think March 1st, I got out, checked in. March 2nd, I met with the staff. By March 3rd, I was pretty told that my life and career were over to go settle for a bare minimum paying job. And I was like, well, that's not going to help. I have 5 kids and a wife I got to take care of. And they're like, nope, well, you better get a job or you're liable to go back to federal prison because you just can't sit around. And at that time, in that federal halfway house, we had to pay 25% of our income directly of whatever we made. We had to pay the halfway house. So they wanted their money, so I had to get a job. So I'm like, well, I'm not going to settle for any job. So filling out numerous applications, I quickly found out that even though in my application process I will mark down, because they ask you, have you served in the armed forces? And you put yes. And then, ironically enough, right after that is, have you ever been convicted of a felony? Well, I would put yes. And I would find out that me checking that box will often get overlooked by me being a veteran. And they would be like, and I would have interviews. And then it wasn't until I had an interview and the HR person who interviewed me, I ran into her 2 days later at my son was about to start freshman. Her son was going to the same high school as my son. And I asked her, hey, do you mind me asking you, like, what has been the problem? And she said, you're a felon. You just got out. And I was like, but my offense, that has nothing to do with what I'm doing now. I was incarcerated for a drug-related offense. What does that have to do with what I'm doing with helping people? And they're like, Ruben, I thought of my hands. And I was like, okay. And that process kept going. Even when I landed my job as a case manager, or FTS was the name of it, with the FTS program, I remember the operational director was like, you need to go apply through the staffing agency because that's who provides our temp to perm hires. We have a contract with them, and from there we hire directly. And I was like, okay. So she gave me the contract, it's like the information, said go over there. There's a job opportunity. We need more male case managers. And they were mindful that they needed more male case managers because they had a high diverse of females. And she's like, you offer a unique aspect because you have a great employment history record prior to incarceration. You're learning from your mistakes. Like, who else than to talk to these people? So I go to the staffing agency. The staffing agency do the interview. And then I had a gap on my resume. And she's like, well, why do you have this 7.5-year gap in your resume? And I was like, well, truthfully, I just got released from being incarcerated. I was like, I got sentenced to 10 years due to my good behavior. I got 3 years out. I was like, 1 year in the halfway house and 2 years for good conduct. And she's like, okay. And pretended to be all cool and everything. Then left, came back, only to tell me, like, there's a year waiting list on that position you're applying for. And I remember looking at her and telling her, like, what do you mean there's a year waiting list? They just told me that they needed more male case managers. We'll reach out to you, but we do have a janitorial position for you at $850. And I already knew that the position I was applying for was paying $19.50. I was like, how am I going from $19.50 to $850? I was like, no, thank you. So it was rough for me at first. Eventually the operational director hired me directly through the company. I got an interview. They liked me, got hired. So the first year was difficult navigating that. Even after that, I was there for a year. I applied for the state because they had a position open for a bilingual employment training specialist. And even when I applied for the state, everybody's like, you're not going to get hired. And I was like, how am I not going to? Why not? What's wrong? And they're like, your criminal background. You just came out a year ago. They don't hire felons. And I think that's a misconception that we have often, that just because of my background, I can't apply. And we totally forget about equal opportunity employment, am I right? The laws. And by this time, I had already learned a little bit enough to say, no, well, they can't discriminate against me because my conviction has nothing to do with the employment I'm doing. And sure enough, I applied and I ended up getting an interview. And I still remember some fellow coworkers of mine that worked with me who applied for the job were upset. They're like, how are they going to give you an interview? And I was like, wow. Like, you work here with me and you're telling me? And they're like, I was like, okay. So long story short, I ended up getting hired for the state. And the same coworker said, I can't believe they hired you and not me. And I was like, well, thanks, I appreciate that. But yeah, so it's funny, but and then in the entrepreneurial world, the employment history was hard. It was a little bit navigating difficult for me. When I decided in 2019 to become an entrepreneur, I had no knowledge of how to run a business the right way. Like, I've always been real mindful. Like, I didn't go to school for business. My school prior was social worker and criminal justice. So I was like, how do I run a legit business? What do I do? How do I file taxes? How do I even register my own LLC? And when I left my state job, I remember going home and like asking my daughter for help. I said, can you help me file for an LLC? Because I don't know what I'm doing. And she's like, yeah, let's sit down and do it together, Dad. And she walked me through the whole website and everything, and reached out to other organizations. One organization I'm real happy that I've been involved with ever since has been BestStarts. I heard of BestStarts that they provide, entrepreneurial training for underrepresented people. And I remember running into Patrick and telling Patrick, I need help. I don't know how to run a business, but this is what I want to do. And he's like, well, let's work together and let's get you going. And that has been, I think the entrepreneurial aspect has been pretty easy, but at the same time, you have to be mindful of knowing that which direction you want to go. Like if you're bootstrapping a company, or if you're looking like the VC funding, the way we went, me and my partner, we were trying to raise funding. We quickly realized that only 3% of Black and brown people actually get VC funding. So one of the questions that arose out of that was, I'm like, if only 3% of Black and brown people get VC funding, what's the percentage of justice impacted people who are brown, who are brown, whose bill's being convicted of a felony? How does that look like? Then we're probably at 0.09 or 1.0%. And that has always been, the battle when we were raising funding, is finding that organization, those VC funders that are willing to provide that opportunity and say, okay, we believe in you guys, regardless of your criminal background. We think you have a great idea. So it's a unique world to navigate both of them. If you're bootstrapping, like a store or opening a business, I think, won't have. I always tell people, like, because I work with justice impacted people, and they all tell me, like, I want to open a business, and I ask them, where are you financially to open a business? Because I realized that quickly, if you don't have something to fall back on, you're more liable to go into that criminal thinking. And it's not that you choose to, but it's called survival mode. Once you hit that survival mode, that you're behind in bills, you need to put food, your kids want to go do stuff, and you don't have money to provide any of that, then your next course of action, the thought, if you don't know how to address it, is, I'm not going to let my kids suffer. I'm not going to let my kids make me feel like I'm not a good parent. So I'm going to try to go get this money. Let me bust out a quick move. And then now you put yourself in a worse situation than you were before. So I always tell people, like, have your financials set up. I was fortunate enough that I was a veteran, that I had funding, that I had my disability to fall back when I left the state, that I also knew that I was going to school. So I also knew that I was getting an assignment to go to school. So when I leveraged both pros and cons, I was like, okay, well, I'm able to have at least $3,000. Can I sustain myself with this? Yes. I mean, with that, but how long does that last? Okay, I have 2 years. So if I don't make it in 2 years, give or take, then I'm going back to corporate America or nonprofit world to try to do something, because I'm not going to be out here scraping quarters, And mind you, I did for like a year when we started once we launched in 2021, the pandemic happened. This is my highlight of my entrepreneurial world life. I think I always tell people is, I remember going to a gas station and I thought I had money with me, and my account there was some charge that came out, and it was overdrawn already, like -100, because my check didn't come, my disability check, I miscalculated, poor management of my money, and I'm like, holy crap, I'm in need. I got like 20 miles left, and I'm scraping quarters just so I could put gas. And I remember having the quarters, and I had like $5 in quarters. And I took a picture of it and sent it to my sisters. I was like, when did I ever think that if I was running a big drug organization, I would be scraping quarters just to put gas? But you know what makes me proud? That I'd rather scrape quarters than go back to that lifestyle. And I think to me, that was when I knew that my mindset had already changed. That I was like, I'm content to being who I am now. Like, I no longer need to play that survival mode, because I'd rather do things the right way. And like ever since then, I was like, okay, I'm happy. I've learned to accept this new Ruben now.
That's a good story to have, and it kind of, I think, a lot of folks would resonate with what their moments like that are. I never even have heard that before. And so 2 things that you talked about I wanted to mention. One, I want to fact check, but I'm pretty sure, I've been told this by somebody who did research on this for the ACLU in Maine, that Wisconsin is the only state in the entire country that has having a criminal record is a protected class regarding employment in their constitution. So it's interesting to think, like, of all the states, Wisconsin would be the only one. And the other one is something I'm going to dive into more, and we might talk to a little bit about later on here. But I want to get a episode where I'm talking specifically with like a person that's an expert on this, but the insurance component, right?
Oh,
so how
God.
like that box where that HR person made the comment, I'd be willing to bet a significant part of that is because the company just has decided they're not going to take the risk of liability because insurance dictates, they're a higher risk to hire people that have a record.
I don't think so, because if you stop and think of it, and insurance is an interesting topic. It has been for me, for the longest, because you have a lot of tip agencies that will hire just impacted people. Remember, so they just, when you're attempt to perm, you provide some kind of insurance, but not everything.
Okay.
So, as when you hire someone permanently, then you got to provide that employment insurance.
Right, so that was a temp. That situation would have been a temp?
The temp was the one that I hired.
Okay.
But then I got hired
right.
directly through the company,
Yeah.
that I had insurance through the company, and I had insurance through the state as well.
Yeah.
But it becomes unique when you're trying to get insurance for yourself as an individual.
Yeah.
And even in the business aspect, as an entrepreneur, once we secure VC funding, we're mandated to get insurance, So my business partner, it was easy for him to get insurance at a low cost.
Yeah.
Then when it came down to me, I was still on federal papers.
Right.
So that came an issue. And I was like, well, okay. And then eventually, once I got off federal papers, I was able to find, a company to get me. But my price, I was paying 3 times what my partner was paying. And everything took a liability of the fact that I was just impacted, that I had a felony, that I had just gone off probation and parole. And I was like, wow, okay, interesting.
That's a lot of what I found. So just, I guess, to highlight for anyone watching, your partner also has a record, but it's like over a decade, 2 decades old?
Yeah, his was in the early 2000s.
Yeah, so that distance, like you said, as soon as you're done with paper, you found it easier. And that's what I've been told. Some places you're not even eligible, like Northwestern Mutual, not even eligible till you're off.
Until you're off papers.
Yeah. So then that's interesting about the temp part. And I'm also curious, at some point I got to learn more about this, the liability funding that they have. I can't think of the term for it, but they will cover any issues that happen on the job federally with federal funding if somebody's hired that has a record. And so that doesn't give companies that claim anymore, because like, this is covered actually. So I have to look into that. There's WOTC funding, and there's also that. It's the bonding.
The federal bonding.
Yeah.
No, but federal bonding is not for life insurance.
No, I mean just for liability if something happens on the job.
No, not even. No. Federal bonding, what it covers is if you hire someone who has kind of like fraud, anything, money laundering, someone stealing something, So it gives the employer that security. Embezzlement is one of the big ones. It gives the employer that security that covers them up to a certain amount of money, so they could provide that opportunity to provide that second chance for employment.
Yeah.
But it has nothing to do with life insurance. It's more of an insurance of that you're not going to steal from the company.
No, the liability. That's what I'm saying.
Yeah.
Not the liability. Yeah, so that area would be the liability. So I am curious to know how much that plays into it, and that's what I want to dive into.
And I think it's only for a year also.
Yes.
You file for like 6 months, which is funny, because federal bonding is so big. People talk a lot about it, and it's a unique topic that I'm hoping eventually, as I continue learning this,
it's not used that much.
It's not used that much. So what happens to that money?
Right.
So much money gets put aside for that in Wisconsin, but yet when I was working for DWD, Department of Workforce Development, I think we only had like 3 people for that year, and like up to 6 people in 2019. So then what happens? And you continue to ask, well, how many people apply for federal bonding? 10, 15. So what's happening to all this money? Where is it going to? What is it being used for,
Yeah. Does the company apply or does the person apply?
The person does. So
really?
the person actually gets a letter of hire, and then the person takes the letter of hire to DWD, Department of Workforce Development, and shows them, and then the DWD issues a certificate for the company.
Okay.
So
that's so funny. I would have thought the company would be the one to do that.
Yeah, so would I.
So kind of backwards. Okay. So then, in the process of, having to apply for jobs and creating your own thing, and my experience has been that, also with the caveat that I have not to this moment actually applied for a job since I've been out. My path was getting out, I had school, and then I just was the whole time building out the nonprofit. And by the time I literally, I think the month I graduated, we got a grant where I was able to get paid finally, where I'd been doing it for, at that point, 8 years for free. 5 to 6 of that were incarcerated, so it doesn't really count. But I had been, just trying to get to that point because I was going to have to take a job if nothing came about. But so I had significant experience applying for jobs before, but I've never really applied for jobs with a record, right? So I don't have that experience in a weird way. But what I do know from all the stories that I've heard from people who have been dealing with that and then creating something is that they both just have their different types of difficulty.
Yeah.
But that what I imagine is the freedom to have the difficulties be something that you can overcome versus the difficulties of trying to get somebody to give you a chance. That hits different. And so I'm curious, how has it been for you?
It does and it doesn't. It does hit different in the fact that you're in control of your own schedule, your own, your own grind. So I often tell people, I've grinded 20 hours for doing the wrong stuff. Why not grind 20 hours for doing the right stuff, Especially, so that's the difference, mentality that you bring into this. What, I'm grinding for me to provide the right way. But then it comes to a point of if you don't see no results, then what's your next course of action? Then you're left with either I gotta go get a job, like you said, or I gotta go into survival mode, and you gotta be prepared to say that if that survival mode is gonna lead you in a path of criminal activity, to say, okay, no, I don't wanna go this way. And people often don't understand that if you're grinding 20 hours the right way, but it's not working, there's nothing wrong with you go getting a job and then continue to grind the other 12 hours the right way. But now you have something to put in and income coming in by you quickly thinking that I got to go to this criminal activity mode. So to me, like I said, I had leverage. I had a 2-year leverage that I could play around with. But I also knew that at 18 months, if this wasn't working out, that if I wasn't seeing nothing, then I was going to get a job. Because I was at no point in my mindset was already said that I would never go back to doing something illegally. Because it's going to cost me about 25 to 30 years of my life. I already know that. So why would I, I'm not ready to give that much of my life no more.
That's a wonderful point. For me, everything in life is odds. You're never guaranteeing success or failure at any time. You're just increasing the odds that one is going to happen, the other one's not. And I was saying to somebody the other day, that I've made a number of mistakes since I got out, but all of the good things that I've been doing have allowed me to have protection against those dumb things. So if I hadn't had that, the chances of that taking over and resulting in some catastrophe in my life were limited. And so when it comes to people that want to start businesses that are formerly incarcerated, what I find commonly is folks that are coming home or just came home and they have this grand idea, they want to start something. And right away I think of 2 things. One, lesson that I know I've definitely learned in my own experience and I've heard countless times is slow the hell down, right? You got to experience life as a free person before you start trying to do all this other crap, right? Especially if you spent a long time in prison, you have to reacquaint yourself with freedom before you start to jump into a whole different responsibility level. The other one was that if you're starting a job as a way to save your life, that's gonna have a high chance of failure. It has to be something you're coming from a state of I have some money to work with and figure this out, or I really have a great idea and I want to do this, but it can't be this is my way out of the rat race. You gotta have a platform to build off of instead of you can't try to save somebody else or build a boat while you're literally drowning, right? So that's what I think from what you're commenting on is it stands out for me is if you're going to try to start a business, if you're formerly incarcerated, or even if you have a record, do it from a point of strength. Make sure you achieve a point of strength before you do that.
And I think that's where often, like us, on my way out, what I do is, that's where I leverage BizStar's Adam, all right? Because it's different as me telling you as an executive director or even as a reentry support partner, if you want to look at me, and a justice impact person telling you, hey, look, you need to slow down. The idea sounds great, but I don't know if it's gonna be as easy. So when I refer them, any time anyone tells me I want to be an entrepreneur, I have a business idea, let's help you fill out an application for BizStar, because now you have someone from the outside, a third party telling you, because they have a business coach that's gonna tell you, Okay, what do you have? Okay, what's the reality of this working, not working? What next course of actions? And now you have someone else telling you, look, I'm not trying to hate on your game. I'm not trying to just tell you, hey, go get a job because it's probably gonna give me a success story. You being successful is a success for me, regardless of how that looks for you. However, it's success you measure success, that's success for me. I was like, but now you have a third party telling you, yes, but you need to do X, Y, and Z. And mind you, because I never went to business school, and there's, nowadays a lot of organizations, you go to, people come out with myths. Or I could come out and get a grant.
Yeah.
I could get a for-profit grant. Or I got X amount of money because I just came out of prison. And those are all myths that people don't know, that when you're incarcerated, you're fitting into that, And then you come out and reality check is, there is no grants for profits. It's hard to get, in that you have to win pitch competitions. You have to do bootstrap it. And then you're like, but I thought I had up to $25,000. No, you don't. I don't know of organizations that do that. And having that conversation with them and telling them this another, how is it that we call it when you're locked up? Inmate.com kind of thing, I was like, look, just like when they told you were going to get $350 for clothes when you come out. Not true, So having those conversations with the individuals, it hits sense, it hits reality,
Yeah.
And that conversation looks different when I'm working with someone who's already been out here, because then I'm able to break it down like, hey, you've been out here already. You've been out here for a year, for a month. Have you seen anything? And often, I'm like, all jokes aside, we always say, where are they giving something for free so I could go?
Yeah.
I was like, nothing's for free. You need to invest time. Let me connect you to someone who is better, adequate, and knows about this field than I do. But then you're going to hear the reality of it.
Yep.
Now, how can we support you to get there?
Yep.
So.
And that balance also between, understanding people who are trying to give you hard truths about the odds or the reality of your project, your dream, aren't trying to kill it, right? And they might be wrong as well, but you need to hear these stories because there's truth in the experience that other people have had in the business world, right? So it's that balance between this person might tell me this isn't going to work, but that doesn't mean they're right. But there's some things in what they're saying I need to be aware of, to be prepared for. And also, inmate.com is funny because also that's an actual website. So whenever I am a couple times in Messenger, especially, I've said to somebody oh yeah, I heard on inmate.com because we're talking about rumors that are inside. And a whole ass website will pop up under Messenger. And I'm like, I'm not trying to send you this link. I was just trying to type inmate.com.
Interesting.
It does that automatically. So I wanted to talk about the housing element then as well. So it's kind of very similar, right? Starting the huge thing is easier and has less obstacles than just getting a job. Getting an apartment from, everyone I've heard consistently is more difficult than getting a house from the couple people I know. And we even had a friend of mine, Jeremy Taylor, come on one of our seasons previously for the video series. And he said he found, Jeremy has a high level of education. He got a master's degree in finance inside. He had a bachelor's degree in computer or something before he went in, speaks 3 languages. Was just ready to, he was already doing a lot of work release at Generac. And he said he couldn't get an apartment in Florida, but he tried to buy a condo. He said it was no problem whatsoever. So that's just a common theme I've heard. And I myself have not to this moment tried to buy a house alone. I've been along for the ride of the process and seen that my record never came up as an issue. And I also know when I started getting an apartment, I said to myself, I'm not going to play the game of just applying for places and paying $25 each time just to get denied. Unless I know the property manager, the owner, and can talk to them about my story, I'm not even going to waste my time with it. And so fortunately, I was able to catch somebody and pitch, who I am, and they were like, yep. So I got my single cell now on Brady Street that I enjoy. And so I'm just curious, from having been in the space now of housing and having your own experiences with, getting a place and you got out and having a family, what have you kind of seen between those two dynamics as well?
I think we assume that it's easier to buy a house, but we neglect every journey in itself is unique. If you have someone who's doing work release coming out, they have that work history that they've been working in work release. So they're able to show that, I've been working here for 2 years, 3 years in work release, was able to save some money. I have money to put down, so you're able to build that credibility. As if you're coming out with no work release or no experience, then you have to have 2 years of taxes to buy a house. You know, like, so if you don't have that, is people are going to tell you, how do we build you up to that? So renting, I think renting right now is the hottest topic in Wisconsin, if not everywhere in the United States. But I know Wisconsin for itself. After the pandemic, we transitioned. Before the pandemic, it was employment. After the pandemic, it became, I need housing assistance. And not only that, landlords raised their rent because it was a high demand. So what you used to pay $550, now you're paying $750, for like a 1-bedroom apartment. And you're like, people was like, wow, prices went up, economic went up, and it's supply and demand. At the end of the day, it's supply and demand. Landlords get to pick who they rent to, because prior to that, you had people that had employment and they could go, and maybe it was hard for them to get a job before the pandemic. So whenever they found a house, they would stay there longer. Now they're able to get jobs, they're able to make more money, they're moving wherever they want to move. So landlords are like, if I have a tenant, I'm going to keep this tenant, Like, how do I adjust you and if I have to decide, do I rent someone with a criminal conviction or do I rent someone who has no record at all? I'd rather rent to someone that doesn't have. The other thing that we found out that we were able to see is that, the reality is when ARPA funding came in, we transitioned into ending homelessness in Milwaukee. So a lot of people that were homeless got places, because they got assistance. And when you talk to landlords are, I've tried this already with, when the pandemic happened, and they've ruined my whole properties. And it was like, it's not that they've ruined the whole properties. You're moving people who've never had experience in living in a home, that we had to educate them of what it is to be a tenant, So we've asked, like the approach we took is we're asking landlords, do you mind if we're the middle person? Do you mind if, something happens? Let us know before something happens. Communicate with us. Don't just go call or file eviction on them because they're 5 days late on the rent. And don't call me at the 15-day mark and telling me they're late. Let me know as soon as you're hearing what's happening, And the same thing, having those conversations with the tenant, with the justice impacted person. It's like, if you see something happening that you might have trouble, reach out to see how we might be able to help. We just had one of our guys, he was working, had a job. They laid off everybody. And, he's like, I have X amount of money saved. He has his kids, custody of his kids, and he's like, I might be at least $200 short. And okay, how can we let us help you? Okay, now what's your next course of action? Let's look at your resume. He's applying for jobs and everything. He already got a job offer, so it's good. But we were able to jump in, so he doesn't miss this month's rent, and he's able to pay that, and it's not behind, and it doesn't show as a negative impact that, I'm behind. Because I don't know if with Wisconsin's like that overall, but I know Milwaukee for itself, landlords are real quick to file an eviction, like real quick, and it's like, dude, how do you establish that communication between the landlord and the tenant so they don't file an eviction and it doesn't negatively impact you?
Yeah. So you touched on something that before I answer this last question, I want to highlight 2 parts. One is there's this element to a lot of the problems that I've encountered in the space of having a record and trying to get back into society and reintegrate, where there are actually some, not going to say good solutions, but understandable reasons why certain discriminations exist, right? So if I'm a landlord and I don't really know much about this space, well, yeah, logically, I have like 10 candidates, 8 of them don't have a record, 2 do. I'm going to focus on the 8 that don't. It just seems easier for me in my mind. So there's like that element. There's the aspect of tenants that they have given a chance to, making them feel like they're not going to do it anymore. And I think of the work that David Carlson's doing around the tenant support, and they have like the peer support specifically for folks in Eau Claire they've been working with, and they're coming down here too, where they give them month-to-month leases. They really have people that are there to manage these issues so that the landlord doesn't have to. They're leasing properties to then sublease to the tenants, so that they're like coming in as this barrier between the landlord and the tenant. So like the landlord's like, we're getting somebody that's paying rent, we're good, and we're not having to deal with those problems. And so like there's a lot of ways that can be used and applied to address those problems. I mean, I say a lot. There is a way, right? It's just like having to be able to get places that allow it. And so Yeah, I thought those are interesting points that I always find in this space. So now, what would you say you'd like to see done in the immediate and the long term? The immediate being something that's doable to address the housing issue, long term being something that would like prevent it, but probably is not as doable immediately, if that
I
makes
think
sense.
the immediate, solution is you touched about what David Carlton's doing, and it's something that we have advocated heavily on. Instead of doing this 6 months or 12 months lease, let's do that month-to-month lease, with landlords, and be like, let the tenant show you that he's able to maintain this house. Let's do a month-to-month lease, and the landlord's not losing at all because you're still getting your security deposit, and then you're getting in the first month's rent. So then let's move on from there. And then let's build up that credibility. So if that person's there for 90 days or 6 months, then you as a landlord be willing to provide a letter of reference or offer that 1 year lease if that person wants to stay there, or that other 6 month lease without having to be worrying about that person if I'm going to have to be here the next month or not. But I think that's a short term action that we could take in effect is educating landlords and be like, let's do a month-to-month lease. It's more doable. We understand that you're looking for that long term, but let's build up to that. Let's build that relationship. Get to know me for who I am. Get to see that I'm working hard, that I'm able to pay my bills, I'm able to manage my money, and then give me that long term 6 months, or give me a reference letter, because other landlords, if you want to move out, are gonna ask where were you living and can I contact that landlord and be willing to speak about it. Yeah, you know what? Mr. So-and-so, Mrs. came out and was a good tenant, and if you're working with a third party, with a nonprofit, be able to mention that yeah, the organization that they were working with also assisted in helping them out, and transitioning. One of the things that I've advocated heavily on that short term is how does reentry look like when you don't have to worry about those first 3 months of rent, then that gives you that credibility to build with that landlord month to month, 3 months, okay, and then you're finding employment, addressing the issues you need to do, and talking with the justice impact person is, okay, you're not going to pay rent for the next 2 or 3 months. What are you going to do with that money? What is your next need? Transportation often becomes that, am I right? Well, I want to get a better job, but I don't have a car. Okay, well, if you were paying $800, that gives you $2,400. Save that money, put it aside, and let's buy you at least a used car that's going to get you from point A to point B, but it's going to give you the opportunity to upskill your employment and make more money possibly. Now you could have gone from making $17 to making $20 because you're driving a little more and you have a car transportation. So, and then long term, what I like to see is if we're talking about fair chances, where we often do talk about fair chance employment, am I right? We have to have a fair chance policy for housing where people do not get discriminated based on their backgrounds. I think that's something in policy I would love to see, that, landlords cannot discriminate regardless of backgrounds. We have zoning issues, and I'm well aware when it comes to like sensitive cases of people, certain people could live in a certain amount of miles and all that. Okay. But we've done such a good job, even in Milwaukee, to lower that standard and be mindful. So if we're able to do that, there should be no excuse why we can't apply that through the whole state of Wisconsin. Because to me, it saddens me that a sensitive person has a sensitive case that has to be in the registry. It's easier to find housing in Milwaukee, but then you go to Waukesha and you can't find nothing, and you're forced and you're being told you have to be homeless. And regardless, I've met people that making $32 an hour, and have to be homeless because they can't find nowhere to live. And I'm like, it's ridiculous. There's a person that could pay a one bedroom at $750 with no trouble, but can't find a home. And I mean, one of the things I always advocated in the for-profit and non-profit is the reality in life is you're only good as an employee as your life, living circumstances. Because you could have a $30 hour job, you have a $20 hour job, but at the end of the day, if you're still homeless and you still gotta worry about where you're gonna lay your head, it eventually is gonna catch up to you. That you'd rather just say, you know what, F it, I'd rather just go back and have a cell to lay my head in. Especially in winter. I mean, Wisconsin's known for what, 8 months? Being cold?
Well, so those are key indicators and key points that I think we are bit by bit trying to work on in different ways. So I think it's good to have that for anyone that's listening to get a sense of like the issue and where we need to go and like what can be done. I appreciate your time, but I want to see if there's anything you have a question for me on before we go, just in case. Not like you have to, just curious if you have any questions for me. You know.
Honestly, I think I would ask the same question because I know you advocate heavily, and I mean, you've been my go-to person, one of my go-to person when it comes to like, okay, what needs to be done, or if something's not happening. I mean, the community newsletter has been like a great partnership for us, like you were able to get us out there. But like, same question for you, like, what do you see yourself advocating when it comes to like in this next, let's say, year, and then furthermore on this housing?
Yeah. So for one, I think the supportive housing, the month-to-month leases, and the mentorship is like the most immediate, easy. No reason we can't do that, especially with people that are doing it successfully. I think the long term for me, and this is like the running theme of the work that I do, is I think doing a lot more around getting in front of folks to address that narrative is huge because there's this belief from tenants, there's this belief from so many people that are decision makers when it comes to the way housing operates, that there's a fear about people that have a record. And there's a justifiable aspect. I think that we do ourselves a disservice by speaking a story as if anyone that has a record should just be given a chance. Like if I was a landlord, I would be also, as a person with a record, I would be careful about who I'm giving housing to. I wouldn't deny because you have a record. I would look more at the like level of stability and income you have, and I would try to find something where, is there a David Carlson? Is there a place like that, right, that we can bring you in? So I think it's really just getting in front of places like the RPA, like the realtors, like the folks that manage a lot of rental properties, whatever that may be, and decision makers, and saying, these are the stories of people who have criminal records that you don't see because you're seeing the negative ones, or you're hearing about one person at a round table at a meeting with other landlords where it went wrong because they tried to give somebody a chance, and now you're like, oh yeah, like I've heard about it being a bad thing, so I'm also not going to do it then, right? So just correcting that narrative, that type of work is what I would long-term like to see a lot more opportunities on. And then we can tie that in with those events, these long-term policy changes. So that like for me, the narrative for me is the root of all of this, right? You address that, everything gets easier. It's soil change work. And so that would be the areas where I am and would like to continue working on.
Thanks.
All right. Well, thank you, Ruben Gaona, and thank you, Collectivo, in the future
Salud.
for your sponsorship. There are two things that I want to highlight from my conversation with Ruben. One is the example he gave of his commitment to living a different life. Ruben's story is commonly held up, especially in the business community, as an example of inspiration for other people struggling past their background and situation to succeed and take back their lives and narratives. The story of him putting together the coins for gas rather than taking the easy way to get money can be an embarrassing and antagonizing experience. His decision speaks to the need for those of us on a path of change to become in our bones what we want to become and who we want others to become as well. So often we wear what I call the attire of change, but struggle or lie to ourselves about how deep that goes into our mindsets and character. There are a variety of activities and strategies to make the way we want to become part of our internal makeup in a solid, inherent way. Storytelling, of course, is one that I will always highlight. Opposite action strategies to minimize the ego, gratitude reminders and meditations to start the day and throughout the day, avoiding people, places, and things that will trigger us or pull us back into negative actions, and so many others that people can tap into. In addition to the importance of doing these things to legitimately change and become what we want others to be in life and ourselves, there's a very powerful way that when a person is insincere or not really as far along in that path as they say and they want to be, other people can see that. And sometimes it results in that person not getting an opportunity, and they can view that then as unjust instead of realizing people are just seeing that they're not really showing up the way that they think they are. The second topic I want to touch on is something I will highlight in our next season, and that is the way insurance underlies a large amount of the discrimination people with criminal records face in the workplace, the hiring process, getting into school, and participating in other volunteer and society opportunities. And then there's insurance itself. Having a record can result in increased rates or straight denial of every type of insurance, especially life insurance, which some places don't even allow you to have until you're off of paper. which is absurd in a state like Wisconsin, where we have such long lengths of post-incarceration time. Whether I have life insurance should not depend on where I am and where I happen to have caught my case in the country. I'll have a deeper conversation about this next season, and I'm involved in an effort right now to potentially address some of this within the insurance industry across the country. So more to come on that. Thank you for listening. Peace.